I was never supposed to keep a copy of the debrief. Officially, it never existed. The logs were rewritten, the data flagged as corrupted, and the airspace quietly reclassified months later. We were separated, reassigned, and told, without being told, that whatever happened that night would not be discussed again. But memory doesn't erase as cleanly as a report. And what we encountered up there, it wasn't something you forget. Not because it was violent, not because it was loud, but because it was precise, controlled. Like we had stepped into something that had already been there long before we ever learned how to fly. This was October 2013, northern Chile. High plateau, near the edge of the Atacama. The kind of place where even sound feels thinner, like it is less to travel through. We were part of a joint reconnaissance detachment, officially tasked with atmospheric sampling and calibration runs for satellite systems. Routine work, predictable, the kind of mission you stop thinking about halfway through. I was the flight systems officer aboard a modified reconnaissance aircraft, an RC-135 variant outfitted for signal analysis. Captain Elena Ruiz was flying, calm, disciplined, the kind of pilot who trusted instruments more than instinct, but never ignored either. Major Hale was running the mission, and we had a small crew handling sensors and electronic warfare systems behind us. We took off just after midnight. Clear sky, no turbulence, clean conditions across every system we monitored. The flight plan was simple, a grid sweep over a sector flagged for intermittent signal irregularities. Nothing dramatic, just brief windows where satellite connections flattened out, not dropped, not scrambled, just gone. No interference pattern, no identifiable cause, just absence. We crossed into that sector a little after 2 o'clock. For the first few minutes, everything was normal. Engine hum steady, instrumentation stable, quiet in that professional way crews get when everyone knows their job and nothing needs to be said. Then the radio cut, not static, not distortion, just silence, total. It lasted only a few seconds, but it wasn't just external comms. Internal channels went dead too. Even the ambient noise in the aircraft seemed to collapse inward. I remember noticing it not because something happened, but because everything stopped happening at once. Then it all came back. Sound returned like a switch being flipped. Systems resumed without error. No alarms, no alerts. According to the instruments, nothing had failed, but something had, because a few seconds later, the temperature dropped. Not gradually, not like climbing through a colder layer. It just fell, fast enough that we all noticed at the same time. No pressure change, no indication of a breach. Just cold air settling into the cabin like it had always been there. One of the sensor officers muttered that particulate readings had gone to zero. At that altitude, there's always something. Dust, ice crystals, microscopic debris. But our sensors showed nothing, as if we weren't moving through air anymore. That's when the smell started. At first, it was faint, metallic, like overheated wiring or copper. Then it changed, something older, something organic, like soil that hadn't been disturbed in centuries. It didn't come from any vent or system. It just appeared, sat in the air with us. No one commented on it out loud at first, but you could see it in the way people shifted, the way they checked systems that had nothing to do with smell. And then Ruiz spoke. She said there was something above us, not on radar, not on any display, just something she could see through the cockpit glass. I leaned forward, trying to catch it from my angle. At first, I thought it was a trick of light, some kind of reflection or distortion, but it didn't behave like one. It held position, steady relative to us, even as we moved. And then it adjusted, not quickly, not like an aircraft maneuver. It just shifted, as if correcting its alignment. That's when I saw it clearly. It wasn't a solid object. It didn't have edges you could define. It looked like a distortion in the air itself, like heat haze, but structured, intentional. Inside that distortion, there were patterns, geometric but wrong, repeating but not symmetrical. They shifted when you tried to focus on them, like they resisted being fully seen. Qureshi, our sensor analyst, tried to lock onto it. Nothing registered. No heat, no radar return, no electromagnetic signature. It was there. We were all looking at it. But to the aircraft, it didn't exist. Mercer initiated an active scan. That's when everything stopped again. This time longer. 7 seconds, maybe more. All the displays froze. The instruments locked. The vibration of the aircraft gone. Not reduced. Gone. Like motion itself had been paused. In that silence, the distortion changed. It didn't expand outward. It folded inward, like something collapsing and growing at the same time. The patterns inside it became clearer, and Qureshi said something that stayed with me longer than anything else. He said it looked like writing. Not symbols, not shapes. Writing. Structured. Deliberate. Later, during debrief, someone brought up ancient Indian markings. Patterns found carved into the earth. Visible only from above. But those were fixed. Dead. This moved. Reacted. When Mercer tried another scan, the thing responded. The temperature dropped again. Sharper this time. Breath became visible in the cabin, which should have been impossible at our altitude and pressure. Ruiz adjusted course slightly. The object matched it. Not chasing us. Not following. Maintaining position. Like we had entered a space that already belonged to it. And then came the part none of us could properly explain. There was no sound. No voice in the traditional sense. But all of us felt it at the same moment. A pressure behind the eyes. A tightening in the skull. Not pain, just presence. And with it, something clear. Not words, but meaning. A boundary. We weren't being attacked. We were being noticed. And what we felt, what we understood, was simple. Leave. Major Hale didn't wait. He ordered an immediate exit. Ruiz turned the aircraft out of the sector. The moment we crossed whatever line we had entered, everything returned. Temperature normalized. Instruments resumed. The smell vanished like it had never been there. Behind us, the sky was empty. No distortion. No object. Just stars. We landed without incident. No one spoke much. The ground crew found nothing wrong with the aircraft. Maintenance cleared it without issue. But the data didn't make sense. The recordings from that window weren't missing. They were there, but unreadable. Structured in a way no one could decode. Not random noise. Something organized. Layered. Repeating. Like the patterns we saw. There was a briefing after that. Restricted. Closed. An intelligence officer presented something most of us hadn't expected. References to pre-Inca cultures, to older civilizations that marked certain regions of the sky as boundaries. Not sacred in the usual sense. Not worshipped. Avoided. They described entities not as gods, but as watchers. Keepers of space that wasn't meant to be crossed. The massive geoglyphs carved into the desert, long thought to be signals to the sky, were suggested to be something else entirely. Warnings, not for what was above, but for those who might fly into it. Within days, everything changed. The mission was classified, the sector removed from flight plans. Satellite coverage adjusted to avoid direct observation. Officially, it was written off as an atmospheric anomaly. Unofficially, we were told not to go back. I've flown enough missions to recognize danger. This wasn't that. It didn't feel hostile. It didn't feel curious. It felt established, like something that had been there long, before we ever had the ability to reach it. And for a few minutes, we crossed into it. Not by accident, but because we didn't know it was there. I don't know what we saw. I don't know if it was something ancient tied to the earth, or something that never belonged to it at all. But I know this. It didn't hide from us. It let us see it. Just long enough to understand that we weren't supposed to be there. And whatever boundary we crossed that night is still there.